Hello and welcome to another episode in the Survival Skills Africa series. In this episode, how to select a campsite and building a shelter using debris or the materials in your environment if you don't have a modern shelter system with you. Remember to check out the other episodes in this series, Survival Skills Africa, and the consolidated video that gives you all of the survival skills in one go. I'm Clarice, welcome to the Live Ready channel. So the weather has changed, and quite quickly at that too. So Doggy and I had to quickly get into our raincoats and cover all our gear, make sure that this stays dry. Don't know whether I mentioned this before, but having a plastic bag can be a great way to improvise a makeshift shelter should a storm suddenly come up, which is the case here, but this is the Western Cape. The temperatures and the weather just changes all the time. So we've quickly jumped into our raincoats, and I'm pretty sure it's going to pass soon. I hope so anyway. And Doggy and I are just sitting, we're just sitting inside the plastic bag, avoiding getting absolutely soaked. And we'll go on a little bit later. Can't see much out there, but it is still raining. Don't be discouraged if you have to make up some or the other shelter with whatever you've got on hand. Maybe you've only got a plastic bag like what I'm sitting underneath now, but that might be enough to keep you dry. Resting is as much of a human need as what water and food is. You can absolutely wear yourself down by trying to scurry around, trying to build shelters and find water and whatever, and by the time you've done so, you find you're so exhausted that you start to suffer mentally and emotionally, and you can't actually cope with the emotional circumstances that you find yourself in. I've been sitting here with my eyes closed, just trying to get a bit of rest, and from carrying around quite a heavy bag with lots of equipment and trekking through the wilderness where there is really no path, I am actually quite tired, so I'm happy to just sit down and take a moment to breathe and rest, consider what my priorities are, consolidate my thoughts, and regroup before we go further. I think that's pretty much the end of the rain. Just a slight drizzle left. Doggy's gonna risk it. Doggy's gonna risk it. This is some really thick bush that we have to travel through. When selecting a campsite, you want to make sure that you're somewhere nearby water but not on top of water. Remember, the animals are going to track to the water, especially at night. We want to make sure that we're not on a game trail so that the animals don't come traipsing through our campsite. We want lots of wood for fire, we want some wood for shelter building, and we want a relatively flat space to lie down on, especially if you're going to build something like a debris shelter, because that's going to mean that you didn't bring all of your usual camping stuff along. So try to make it as comfortable a night's sleep for yourself as possible. First thing I want to do if I'm building a survival shelter is protect my hands. If I injure one of my hands, I'm going to struggle to make fire, I'm going to struggle to hunt, to trap. Even just general everyday tasks can become really difficult if you've sliced your hand on a branch or something. So I'm going to use my gloves to clean out this area, remove most of the branches and the twigs and the leaves, and then put something soft down to make a bed. Unfortunately, that does mean having to remove some of the plants. I'm about 50 meters away from the water. I don't want to be any closer to it. I can actually track further away from it, but then I'm also not having a lot of trees. So I want to just use whatever is in my environment to my advantage and to shelter me from the worst of the elements. The sun is back out and I've got a couple hours to still build my shelter and get a fire started. There's lots of debris in the area, lots of broken branches that are lying down, so I don't even need to saw anything down. I can literally just take what's on the ground and use that to build my shelter. Let's stay. Right. Now that I've basically got the frame of my shelter set up, I want to insulate it, I want to cover it so that if it rains again, that the rainwater just runs off the shelter and that I retain some heat when I'm inside my shelter. For that, I'm going to use all of the branches and the twigs and the grass that I pulled out of the ground to make space for me to sleep, to cover the sides of the shelter. So I've built myself a shelter here. It's just big enough for Indy and I to fit in underneath here, and will stay warm because it is insulated with all of the grass and the leaves in the area. With my shelter built, I can now build a bed for myself. So I've cut some grass and some foliage from the area. The stuff is nice and soft, so I'm going to lay this down on the ground to make it soft, a nice soft bed for myself. But I also want my bed to insulate me. So for that, I'm going to use a space blanket or a mylar blanket. So this is the same one I used earlier to prevent hypothermia. I keep a couple of these in my bag. You can never go wrong with them. They're not all durable, so it helps to have a couple. So the mylar will help me to stay warm because it's going to reflect my heat back to me. With my mylar blanket now flat on the ground, I can take my soft foliage and make a bed on top of that. There's my pillow, and I can use my jacket as a blanket. Scooch all the stuff in under me. There we go. I can use my jacket as a blanket. This way I should be able to stay warm for the night with my fire burning outside, my shelter insulated. I've got an insulating bed and mattress underneath me. I'm using my bag as a pillow, and my waterproof jacket is going to be my blanket. Now make no mistake, none of this is quick work. All of this takes time and a lot of energy. So by the time you've got a shelter up and a bed like this, you're going to be absolutely exhausted. And if you're going to be active like this, you're going to need kilojoules in order to sustain you, and you're going to need water as well. Remember that if you're going to metabolize food, you're also going to need water. It's equally important to allow yourself some time to rest. It doesn't help you find food and you find water, but you're so busy that you're absolutely burning yourself out. You need to take some time to rest. So even if it's just an hour or two in a day, while you're trying to get home, take that time to close your eyes, fall asleep, just forget about what's going on around you, forget about your situation, and just capitalize on some shut-eye. Now I want to start a fire, because the fire is also going to help me to stay warm during the night. So I'm just going to take all of this grass and make it into a really fine tinder bundle. You should have your wood as well. So all of mine is lying over here. I've stacked a whole bunch of wood for my fire, so that I have enough wood. I want to collect enough wood during daylight hours before it starts getting dark. A ferro rod will always give you fire. There we go. I'm also going to warm up all of my water so that I have something warm to drink, and that's going to help me with core body temperature regulation, especially on cold nights where perhaps you've been stuck in the bush and you didn't actually think of bringing a sleeping system. Perhaps you didn't plan to be in the bush, you didn't plan to stay over, so you didn't think that you would need a sleeping system. In that instance, you would take your mylar blanket, spread it in your shelter. You can stuff your clothing with debris, and you can also drink warm water. Having a aluminium or a stainless steel or a titanium canteen that you can put on the fire and warm your water is also going to help you. It pretty much acts like a warm water bottle. So I can use all of these methods to help me to stay warm during the night if I need to spend the night in the wilderness. At the moment, all of the warm air from my fire is drifting upwards and it's getting caught inside my shelter. And that's going to create a microclimate inside my shelter as well. That will help me to stay warm during the night. So if I can keep my fire burning out here, it will definitely help me to have a better night's sleep. In Exodus 3 verse 5, where Moses finds the burning bush, he's instructed to take off his sandals, for the space where he is standing is holy. And it just goes to show you that wherever God is, that space is holy. And whatever is holy is good. So wherever he fills a space with his presence, that space is good. And just a simple shelter like this, and just this small environment, this little campsite, can be filled with God's presence as well. And don't forget that you're not alone in the wilderness. In fact, God's presence is magnified in the wilderness. So I'm stacking some rocks around my fire, and this is a dual purpose. Firstly, it keeps my fire from spreading into the surrounding bush. I don't want to start a bushfire here. It is quite dense bush, so I've removed all of the nearest bushes and branches, and I've separated that with some stones. The second purpose that they have is they're going to get hot now. These rocks around my fire are going to really absorb all of that heat from the fire, and then when I'm ready to go to bed, what I can do is take my hot rocks and I can put them inside my shelter. Those hot rocks are going to release a lot of heat for a period of time, and that's going to help to heat the inside of my shelter as well. Different kinds of stones retain heat for different periods. The more dense the stone is, the longer it's going to retain that heat, and the more heat it's going to provide your shelter. But that's something that you're going to have a look at, experiment with different stones. The kind of shaly white river stones that we tend to find in riverbeds, I find don't actually work that well. But this really dense stuff is pretty good for hot rocks. Now I can take my canteen of warm water, put it back in its pouch, and now I can use that in my shelter as a hot water bottle. That's going to help me to stay warm. Now as I've stoked this fire, it's gotten bigger, it's spilled over onto the rocks, and that's really going to help me to heat these rocks up and put some nice hot rocks inside my shelter. As far as fire safety goes, you want to make sure that your fire is at least 1 meter away from your shelter. If you're going to build a long log fire by using just really long logs, that's going to last a bit longer throughout the night. It's going to warm more of your shelter, but if you've got a closed shelter like this, it's not going to help you to get that much heat into your shelter. So at the moment this is perfectly fine for me, and I just want to make sure that all of the shrubs and all of the bushes around are far enough away, and I've cleared a large enough space so that I don't set the bush on fire. I reckon these stones are warm enough now. I'm going to start stacking some inside my shelter to start warming up the air inside the shelter. It will create a microclimate that will help me to stay warm through the night. And now because these stones are really warm, you obviously don't want to put them near something that will either melt or will ignite really easily. And as I'm going to take them out, yeah, I can feel that's warm. I'm also going to replace them with new ones. Oh, that's hot. Well, I can actually feel that through the glove. So I take one off and replace it with another. Take my fire, take a hot rock off. You can see where the fire has actually warmed it and charred it a bit. And stack them as I go along. Replace it with another. Luckily I've got quite a big pile of rocks here. As I'm stacking these rocks, I have to take note that part of the rock, the inside that's been facing the fire, is going to be much warmer than the side that's been facing away from the fire. So I'm stacking them in such a way that they're going to release heat towards the inside of the shelter, not out of the shelter, because then I'm going to lose the heat from those rocks. because they are really hot, I just have to be careful when I'm getting in and out that I don't end up burning myself. Well, that's it from me in this episode, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to watch the consolidated video on survival skills in Africa that basically puts all of these survival skills episodes together in one. Until the next time, live ready.